the whole 6010.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football. It is Wednesday, November 23rd. Today's show is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico, see all the ways that you could save. Daniel Field and Stefania here, bringing you what is going to be a Friday show on a Wednesday because we're going to take the next 2 days off, Thursday and Friday, to celebrate Thanksgiving. So we're going to cram a ton of stuff into this show today. But first and most importantly, it is our show before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I want to give you guys a chance to be able to talk at least about one thing that you are thankful for here this year, understanding that, other than me, you don't need to both say me, just like one of you. Stefania, you want to go first?
I'm thankful for you.
Okay, Stefania. I appreciate it.
I'm thankful. Oh, no, I don't know which way to go with this because I could get really sappy and sentimental, or I could be,
Let's have
just
fun.
Thankful for my 49ers.
Okay, see, that one works.
I was going to say Justin Fields comes to mind immediately. Austin Eckler, certainly at the top of the list. We have so much
going to the Niners.
Yeah, totally.
I can make it all about the Niners.
Yeah.
So much to be thankful for. A lot of gratitude these days, and in a world in which there are some challenges for everybody every single day. It's nice to have a nest that you can sort of rely upon, and that nest is not just our family here on the Fantasy Focus, but fortunate to have a family, our own families as well, that provide us so much love and support. And I will say, Daniel, you said that we're off the next 2 days because of the Thanksgiving holiday. Is it accurate that we are off for the next 2 days because of Thanksgiving, or are you planning some sort of parade in Detroit on Friday in the event that the Lions win on Thursday against the Bills?
4 straight wins if we beat the Bills. I mean,
Right.
Come on.
Yeah, because I think we do have a show earmarked if the Lions do not win. We might do a show, but if they win, you might go Frank the Tank through downtown Detroit.
Shutting it down. That's exactly what's going to happen. And that's what I would be thankful for. Like, in all honesty, the Detroit Lions have been tough, right? But Hard Knocks was awesome. Dan Campbell is dope. This team has so much youth and being able to build towards the future with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
The Bills can be beaten. Just follow the roadmap the Vikings laid out. You guys got this on Thanksgiving Day. I know it's not typical for you guys to have a win on Thanksgiving Day, but it's a time for new traditions.
That's right,
Let's
Stefania.
Get it started.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions come out inspired. I'm picking the Bills. Sorry, Daniel. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions come out inspired to begin the game. I could see a solid opening drive from Detroit.
I would sacrifice my pick of the back. Like, I would celebrate with you if the Lions win this. It'd be huge.
It would be huge. It would be a huge game. In case you did not listen, we did a preview of all of the Thanksgiving Day games and a couple other games yesterday in the Tuesday podcast. So go back and check those out if you're wondering where those are at. We are going to preview the Sunday games here. Let's jump right in. We got a bunch of stuff to get to. First one is Broncos. Buccaneers at the Browns. It was one of the other B teams. Sorry, guys.
Bees.
Lineup blocks for this game include Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Nick Chubb, and Amari Cooper. But are you starting the guy that's throwing to either of these two pass catchers, Field Yates and Tom Brady? I have him at quarterback 12, give or take this week, but I'm not sure that I feel the confidence in him that I want to yet start him this week.
A lot of moving factors, just to reiterate this, and I think you suggested as such, Daniel, but we don't have any idea on the injury reports here. So there are players that might not be available that could influence some of our discussions today. As of right now, we're using the information that we have.
Also, no bye weeks this week, right?
None.
This
no
Thanksgiving bye week is
no bye weeks at all. We have 2 next week, and then we have 6 the following week. So a big bye week.
Full slate.
In
Everyone's
week
available.
14, but everyone's available in week 12. Tom Brady is outside my top 10 for this week, and a lot of it is because while Tom Brady's been putting up plenty of passing yards and plenty of passing attempts, he has not been good in the passing touchdowns department. And when you are a quarterback that has 0 rushing upside whatsoever, you have to throw touchdown passes to make good on your fantasy starts. And the Browns, it's weird. Like, they don't strike me as this defense that should inspire a ton of fear in opposing quarterbacks. And yet, in 2 of the past 3 games that they've played against really good quarterbacks, they actually have. They neutralized Josh Allen last week. He had 12.6 fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
Back in week 8, they neutralized Joe Burrow to the tune of 13.5 fantasy points. They've had bye weeks and lesser quarterbacks in between. Tua got them for 23.4 points in week 10. But Tom Brady, I think the matchup, for whatever reason, the Browns have just been a bit more resilient. Maybe it's because teams are running the football more effectively against Cleveland. I don't have a perfect answer, but Tom Brady outside my top 10 on the fringe, because you would think he has all of his pass catchers available. He was showing a bit of signs of life prior to the bye week, but given how the season has gone so far, Brady outside my top 10.
Let's talk about the running backs here because this
Big
is
one
something
here.
that's really interesting.
Well, and Leonard Fournette left the game in Munich with a hip pointer, and the expectation was that he would be back after the bye week. But again, because it's Wednesday, we don't have a practice report yet, so we don't even know if he's going to be available to practice. So that's something you're going to want to follow to see if Leonard Fournette is indeed going to be able to play in this game. He did not get the start when they were in Munich. It was actually Rachaad White who got the start. They split time. It's very interesting because Leonard Fournette, at the start of the season, when he was doing so much work, so much volume, said, I can't be the guy to do that. Then a few weeks ago, he gets disappointed because he's not getting enough work. You be careful what you wish for. Kind of thing,
right? Yeah.
Right?
And it makes things really complicated. So let's assume Leonard Fournette plays. I have Fournette ranked as RB25, way lower than where he was
Normally.
both coming into the season and recently. And then Rachaad White all the way up to RB32. So if they're splitting duties, the problem is one of them or both of them has to find the end zone. But this is one of those games. So those are where I have him ranked. Like Fournette probably still going to be close to making most lineups because he has been really good in the passing game as well. But this is one of those observational things. At the beginning of the year, I say this often, like, while I am not like changing my decision on these players, I am keeping an eye out on how things shake out for these players. We don't often say that in week 12 of the NFL season, but let's keep a close eye on this one because if Rachaad White grabs even more of the work, and he ran really effectively during their last game in Munich, and he does pass the eye test, he gives them an explosive element. And last check, they are not one of the worst. They are the worst rushing offense in the NFL by far. 70.1 yards per game. The Rams are 6 yards better than them, and the Rams are an absolute shell of themselves this year. So they may be saying Rachaad White is giving us more. Let's keep a close eye on this one. I have Fournette ranked slightly ahead of Rachaad White, but if you drafted really well or you've picked up players off the waiver wire like a Kenneth Walker III, Leonard Fournette is no longer a lineup block based off of the Rachaad White emergence and the fact that Leonard Fournette has been banged up.
I did not yet have the emotional fortitude to put Rachaad White ahead of Leonard Fournette, but depending on how this week works out, I feel like you're saying we're going to keep watching this because it's something definitely to monitor this backfield.
Totally.
All right, next game is Bengals at Titans. Lineup blocks for this game include Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Derrick Henry. But Stefania, we got a couple of injuries we got to talk about for the Bengals.
I would be concerned about Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase, quite frankly. Joe Mixon had a concussion, left last week's game. On average, missed time due to concussion is at 9 days in the NFL in the last year. So I would say don't count on him for sure, but there's a possibility. So practice reports need to pay attention. Jamar Chase obviously has missed time with the hip injury. Zach Taylor did say that Jamar Chase would be back practicing this week, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he automatically plays. So again, you're going to want to pay attention to the practice reports, and I'll be posting what I see about it, but not a lock to have either one of them.
And there was some comments from the Bengals that when Jamar Chase comes back, they want to kind of ease him back in as well. I think the tricky part here for fantasy is that if you have Jamar Chase on your roster and he plays, you kind of have to play him.
Yeah.
That will be my mentality. If he plays, I will be playing him. And Joe Mixon, if he sits, I think Samaje Perine is a reasonable facsimile of Joe Mixon.
What does it become? Like a low
Top
end
15 play.
RB2?
Yeah, 15-ish. I mean, I have Joe Mixon ranked as running back 12, so Samaje Perine will be not that far behind. Chris Evans, a backup running back, has also been dealing with injury throughout the season, so Samaje should be a very busy guy. He's an awesome pass catcher. He showed it last week. He had those 2 receiving touchdowns plus a rushing touchdown. He's kind of always just been there when the Bengals have needed him. He's usually been pretty solid in the spot duty spot, so I have a lot of confidence here in Samaje Perine, and one of the top waiver wire ads. I'm sure he was amongst the most added players on waivers last night, and if he's out, if Joe Mixon is out for multiple games, you can feel pretty good about Samaje Perine here. That's not to diminish the skill set of Joe Mixon, but as far as backup running backs go, Samaje Perine is kind of like Alexander Mattison in the sense that fully capable to be a rock-solid starter if called upon, and it sounds like on Sunday he could be called upon.
Feel Derrick Henry is the obvious guy that you're starting in this Titans offense. Is there any pass catcher? We watched Traylon Burks last week. It was a really nice game for the rookie, but I don't have either him or Robert Woods inside my top 45, basically, of wide receivers. I can't imagine starting a wide receiver from the Titans right now.
Yeah, so I think Traylon Burks absolutely should be added and stashed on benches right
Definitely,
now. And
yes.
I think that he was probably added a bunch last night after his breakout game, 7 catches for 111 yards. And sort of a chicken and egg thing here with the Titans is the reason why they don't throw the ball that much because they don't have the pieces around Ryan Tannehill to throw it, or is it because they don't need to throw the football that much? And I think the answer, based off of the multiple years of evidence we have, is that they don't throw the ball because they don't really need to throw the ball that much. So if they get into a track meet against Cincinnati on Sunday, then I'm sure Treylon Burks will be a busier guy than you'd expect him to be. But I have him as wide receiver 44 because while you'd love to see 8 targets like he got last week, it seems like 4 to 5 might be a better bet because the Titans find a way. If they can hold the Chiefs to 17 points in regulation, my guess is they can hold pretty much anybody to a lower point total average than they normally post on a Sunday. So not there yet with Treylon Burks in my starting lineup, but hope people added him because he certainly checks a lot of the boxes of being a really good player for a long time.
He is rostered in 32% of leagues right now, so available in almost 70% of
I still would go
ESPN
grab him.
leagues.
I mean, I think that, and this is a time of the year where because 3/4 of the league has already had its bye, you might be one of those people that has just 1 or 2 key players left to go onto your bye, and you can use that back end of your bench a little bit more creatively than you could when you still had half the league or even all the league going into its bye eventually.
All right, let's talk next game. Texans at Dolphins. This one, lineup locks include Dameon Pierce, Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. Stefania, one name that I did not mention there was Brandon Cooks. I feel like we haven't been talking about Brandon Cooks for a while. Would you, if you were rostering Brandon Cooks, would you be starting him this week?
I'd do anything I could not to.
That's, I think, the right answer. That's where I'm at with Brandon Cooks as well.
I'm having a hard time imagining what the argument for starting Brandon Cooks is. The best argument would be that, I do think this one could get ugly early. I think Miami, coming off of their bye, a well-oiled machine offensively, could completely overman this Texans defense.
Yep.
Which is the strength of their roster, by the way, but still, it's a work in progress defensively in Houston. So your best bet is that things get really, really, really ugly early and they have to throw the ball a ton. Yeah. That probably comes at the cost of Dameon Pierce's rushing production, though. So you may not want that for fantasy purposes. I do not have Brandon Cooks ranked. It's been a fall far from grace, both in terms of fantasy and, frankly, for Brandon Cooks' value just in general to the Texans. He wanted that trade. A player to watch this offseason, my guess, if I had to make a guess, would be that Brandon Cooks is not with the Texans next season. That's a much more of a February, March, April conversation.
It sure doesn't feel that way.
Well, but knowing that's how this has gone down, like this, I don't want to start him in fantasy because it feels like there's not like a commitment. Like it doesn't feel like he has the same.
I mean, they committed to him. They gave him a $35 million raise this offseason.
I'm not talking about from the Texans.
No, I know. I'm just saying. I'm perplexed by Brandon Cook's confusion. If he really wanted out, which is what he wanted,
don't sign that
big deal. He could have
man.
not signed that extension 6 months ago when he was going to be a pending free agent, and he did, and he changed his mind. And
I think he thought that they were going to be in a better position than they were. And I don't know why, because he plays for the team. I was going to say,
that feels like a miscalculation on his part, right?
It may be, but I actually think that was part of the reason. Because that was the vibe down there, when they were talking about they thought they were going to win more games than they did last year. I don't think they thought their offense would sputter as badly. I think he thought maybe he'd be a bigger contributor. Just didn't work out.
They are who we thought they were, Stefania. That's how I feel about these Texans right now.
Yeah, it feels like what we're learning too in fantasy is that I remember in the preseason looking into this for running backs about like where do the bottom 5 offenses produce fantasy relevant players. And it's really hard to find a top 20-ish wide receiver or even a top 30-ish wide receiver on these bottom 5 offenses right now. You've got guys that come and go, right? Cortland Sutton can have a good week and then a bad week and then another bad week and then a good week.
Yep.
Jerry Jeudy, you never know between the injury and then also just the fact that he's been inconsistent this season. But it feels like you can find some running back production, right? You can have a Dameon Pierce or a Latavius Murray on just an awful offense, but it's hard to find these consistent pass catchers right now for fantasy on these bottom 5 offenses. And Houston qualifies as a bottom 5 scoring offense.
Yep, Dameon Pierce is the only guy we like there for the Texans. All right,
and even by the way, that makes me a scotch. I'm not sure if that's you.
It is.
Yeah, scotch. Nervous, right? Just because if this game gets out of hand as well and
negative game script.
He ends up with 55 rushing yards and no touchdowns, that makes me a little bit nervous. He hasn't been as involved in the passing game of late as we would like him. Not his fault.
I don't know why. Like, just throw it to him. Like, give him all the points for fantasy.
I think the problem
Come
is
on, Levy.
They've just got some good insurance options behind him, I think is the problem.
Well, I'm not sure they're good, but they are insurance options. If they want a good option, they could have called Geico. Because Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on great insurance? Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help. Like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV.
RBs or RVs?
Did I say RB?
No, you said RVs. I was wondering if running backs also counted.
Oh, RB. Okay, got it. My bad. Oop, right over my head. Even help with homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And Geico is an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you can save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.
DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. It's now the go-to in betting on the NFL this holiday season. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. And everyone can earn up to 100% boost with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, place the same-game parlay, and combine multiple bets like which team will win, player props, point totals, and more. The more legs you add, the bigger the boost, the bigger your shot to win big. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code FFF to place a $5 bet on any NFL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code FFF. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Tennessee, call or text Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Bonus issued as free bets. One early win token issued to opt-in. Moneyline bets only. Deposit and wagering restrictions apply. Eligibility and terms at DraftKings.com/football terms. All right, let's come back out and talk Bears at Jets.
Yeah, big one here. A lot of storylines. Seriously.
There really is a lot of storylines. Justin Fields, David Montgomery, I think, are the two lineup blocks that we have. But Stefania, we need to be able to talk about Justin Fields.
It's such a weird way that they're talking about this. So Matt Eberflus said after the game earlier this week that Justin Fields is day-to-day currently. But on Wednesday, when the injury report comes out, we'll see where he is then. If you were watching the end of that game, Justin Fields was clearly in some pain, reaching up towards his left collarbone, shoulder area, had that evaluated. We know that it's an injury in the shoulder region, but the specifics of the injury are unknown. Thankfully, it's not his throwing shoulder, but that doesn't automatically mean that you can play nonetheless. So we will see what comes out this week. Pay close attention. I think this injury is more significant than Matt Eberflus is letting on, but it sounds like they were doing further evaluation to come to a decision about whether he could play, should play, etc.
I got to be honest with you. I didn't think the way the Bears were handling it was confusing. I thought some of the reporting surrounding it subsequently was confusing.
They're not
right?
helping.
Well, yeah, I just think that's Matt Eberflus has been consistent with. He goes with day-to-day and then the injury report.
Yeah, but there are coaches who are better about saying things like, look, he's getting, we have coaches who will tell us the player's undergoing further evaluation. We'll know more. Instead, he goes, he's day-to-day, but there's a possibility he could also be out for multiple weeks. And so, I don't know. It's just a little gamesmanship.
Yeah, there's the Mike Tomlins and the Sean McVays of the world that are super duper helpful for us. And there are others who are far more coy. Matt Eberflus in that latter group. And obviously, if Justin Fields played, you feel really good about Justin Fields in your lineup because he has just been an absolute destroyer of late. But if he's out, Daniel, it makes me nervous about everybody in this offense.
Yep.
Because this Jets defense is no joke. I know the Jets offense has been very, 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 very inconsistent of late, but this Jets defense is totally the real deal. And if there's no Justin Fields, it will be Trevor Siemian. Trevor Siemian, I have little confidence that the passing offense will be able to move the football effectively at all against the Jets.
It's a polite way to say
if I'm the Jets, I'm going to say, all right, fine. If they don't have Justin Fields, 32, David Montgomery is not beating us. I will be nervous about David Montgomery as well. The upside would not nearly be as high if Trevor Siemian starts in place of Justin Fields.
The Jets might Saquon Barkley the Bears, as the Lions did, because honestly, if there's nobody else in this offense,
now.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
There's nobody else in this offense. Like you're starting. I realize that no Khalil Herbert, no rushing Justin Fields. You think, wow, David Montgomery might be a smash play, but if they just put 9 guys in there and say, hey, we're going to let Trevor Siemian beat us. That's the way that you're going to win this football game, it feels like. So
100%.
What about the other side of this game? You got the 2 running backs fielding both Michael Carter and James Robinson. Both of them are sort of low-end RB3s, or I guess, low-end RB3s for me. I don't really feel confident or comfortable with either one of them with the way that this Jets offense is playing.
Yeah, the preference remains Michael Carter because he's still playing more snaps. He's running more routes. He has more total touches. He has more total fantasy points in the 3 games. I think what we're realizing with James Robinson, unreal comeback. Unreal. I have the utmost respect for how fast and how miraculous he got back from that torn Achilles. Not a lot of juice there, though. There just isn't. And 3 yards per carry in 25 attempts with the New York Jets. He's not the preferred passing game option. We have no idea who's going to be the starting quarterback on Sunday for the Jets. Here's the one thing that gets me more interested in Michael Carter, is if it is Mike White on Sunday for the Jets, I do have more interest in Michael Carter. And right now there is a conversation about who's going to start for the Jets.
Yep.
Zach Wilson is not guaranteed to be that starting quarterback. I got a feeling that when the head coach is opening the door to somebody besides the normal starter being under center, it basically means we've made up our mind. We're going to hold off on making an announcement officially for a couple of days, but we realize what the rest of the world realizes as well, which is he's holding us back. And so I think it's Mike White under center on Sunday, and Michael Carter becomes a little bit more interesting because for reasons that I don't exactly know, Mike White loves targeting the running backs. He loved it all of last year. He didn't have Garrett Wilson last year, obviously, but I have a bit more confidence in Michael Carter if Mike White is the starter. He might be a top 25-ish play as opposed to an RB 30, which is where he is right now.
Yeah. What about Garrett Wilson? If we switch over from Zach Wilson to Mike White, does a whole lot even change from that perspective?
I don't know. I think Mike White is I don't know exactly how to describe how Zach Wilson has played so far this season. I mean, obviously inconsistent and obviously poor, right? But I think Mike White as a passer seems a bit more fearless than Zach Wilson does. And I'm not saying Mike White is a superior talent, not a superior player. One of the guys was drafted number 2 overall. One of them was drafted in the 4th round, bounced around the league. But I think Mike White has a bit more fearlessness. And I think that might lead to better days for the passing game on the whole. No, it sounds crazy. I know Jets fans are perplexed why this is the case right now. But Garrett Wilson's still wide receiver 35 on my board. And I don't know that one will change that much if the quarterback changes, because if he likes the running backs, does that come at the cost of the wide receivers a little bit?
Sure.
It's just hard to it's hard to place 2 bets of faith in the Jets passing attack when they've been how they have been over the past month or so.
And like you said, one of these quarterbacks was drafted number 2 overall. One of these quarterbacks is going to start on Sunday. It's not the guy.
I'm assuming it's Mike White if it's not Zach Wilson. It might be Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
We don't know.
I'd take Joe Flacco right now in this offense too.
Garrett Wilson would go way up if Joe Flacco starts.
Seriously.
If Joe Flacco starts, Garrett Wilson in my lineup.
Agree. Yeah, totally agree on that.
Yep.
Because they had a connection earlier this year.
They totally had a connection.
And Joe has become, listen, Joe Super Bowl MVP. Like, the guy's an unbelievable career. Like, made a ton of money. He's become a little bit of like an internet sort of like sensation too, but sometimes like the butt end of the joke on the internet. But he helped this offense look a lot more functional early on this season.
Way more.
His own kids make jokes about
Yeah,
him. And he's
we
a
talked
good
about
sport
that.
about it. I've come to like the senior version of Joe Flacco.
Yeah,
quite a
we're
bit.
in the internet era. If you can't laugh at yourself,
And by
we're
the
in the
way,
wrong line of work.
there's definitely a quarterback change after what happened. It's not only about the play of the quarterback, it's about the vibe of the quarterback with the rest of the team. So
I know. I mean, like when they have Jimmy Garoppolo next year, it's going to be a much different outlook.
Hey.
let's just win a Super
Honestly,
Bowl
what
first.
if you?
You know what?
We kick it down that path. Our brains can't process the idea of the 49ers win the Super Bowl having to make a quarterback decision this offseason.
Because Robert Saleh does know Jimmy Garoppolo.
Of course,
I mean, of course,
that's
you know.
that's the connection there. Yeah.
All right, next game we have here. Ravens at Jaguars. Lineup blocks include Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk. But Stefania, what are we going to have in that backfield for the Ravens?
Oh, I don't know, Daniel. Every week it's a different guy. And Kenyon Drake has been the one who's been sort of leader of the pack recently. Gus Edwards has had a hamstring injury that's bothered him. And then right before we got to this week's game, they had knee added to the list next to that. So that gave us a little, it made his status a little less certain going into the game. He was not active, as we know. And again, practice report's not out yet for this week. I do think Gus Edwards will come back. I don't know if it's this week, though.
Yeah.
Here's the good news. 16 teams are playing this week. 16 games being played, so 32 teams playing. I think you can avoid the Ravens running backs entirely because there are enough options. Not that running back is super deep, but I think you can avoid them, and that would be my preference. Even if Gus Edwards is out, as we saw last week, it went to a 50-50 split. There have been a couple of games this year where Kenyon Drake has been the man. The problem is that you don't have a crystal ball into the Ravens' offensive game planning room, and it's hard to figure out when those games
Your
with Kenyon
entire
Drake
offense
being the
is
man.
hard to figure out.
Stefania,
Like Lamar Jackson
is-
doesn't look like himself.
He doesn't look like himself. It's been 7 straight games.
I
He's
know.
had one game inside the top 10. So
I don't feel like he's
quarterback
playing
9 or
with a
better.
consistent crew either, right? So he doesn't know what he has. The running back's been all mixed up. Wide receivers have been banged up. He lost his guy, Rashad Bateman, who he really had a connection with.
Yeah.
And then he's been ill himself. Like, it's just, they feel out of sync to me.
Totally.
And it's really hard to gauge their offense and what they're going to do.
12 touchdowns in the first 3 games. He was unbelievable, was Lamar. It's just been a total shell of himself fantasy-wise
I think
till
part of
then.
it's
And a lot of
everyone
it's
around him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh
And
no,
Mark
it's definitely
Andrews.
not
Mark Andrews
it's
has
definitely
been
not
healthy.
his own doing,
Yeah.
right? It's a lot of it is the pieces around him, as Stefania is saying. He's been saved over the past 7 games by his rushing. He's still averaging over 60 rushing yards per game, but just 1 rushing touchdown. That came last week. So Lamar's like mega super duper upside that he was the Justin Fields level of upside before Justin Fields is like Justin Fields is rushing for a ton of yards and touchdowns. And Lamar has just 1 rushing touchdown in his past 7 games. It's been a much different season. I do have him inside my lineup blocks, as Daniel said, but I get it out there. If you're sort of like, man, where's Lamar been for me recently? Because he thought at the beginning of the year, I may have drafted the value amongst quarterbacks in fantasy because he wasn't going quarterback 1. He was going quarterback 4 or 5 in drafts.
And it's just tough, though, with Mark Andrews being basically the only pass catcher that you can consistently count on around Lamar Jackson. Because I'm not starting any of these other wide receivers, right? No. Devin Duvernay may have a game here and there. Like, you may have some
Marcus
guys.
Robinson chips in here and there.
It's just the weird thing is that, like, even in Lamar's MVP season, 36 passing touchdowns, unanimous MVP, it wasn't like he had Cooper Kupp and Mike Evans and, Tyreek Hill around him, right? Like, he has thrived in previous years with just a little bit more around him than they've had this year. So it's a tricky one. It's a really tricky one.
I think it's not even who the talent is. It's the talent week to week because it's the inconsistency of who is formulating the lineup around him. Anyway.
Really quickly on the Jaguars, anyone else? Evan Ingram is a guy that you've been able to use as a dart throw, a streamer, but Field, one of the things, part of why we talked about it, with no bye weeks this week, you don't really need those streamers this week. So I think you'd probably stay away from Evan Ingram if you need to.
Yeah, it depends. I would say that the only way he probably cracks lineups is obviously with Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz and other tight ends now banged up. Kyle Pitts, who's on IR. You do have guys that were considered lineup locks, even if by default, necessarily not by preference in the case of Kyle Pitts, that are not available. And if you're in a league in which somebody is hoarding multiple tight ends, right? If somebody in your league not only has a Travis Kelce, but has a David Njoku on their bench, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, so I can play Evan Ingram or I can play, like Mo Alley Cox, he would get the nod under those circumstances. But yeah, he's tight end 18 on my board this week. So certainly not a guy that needs to be in lineups.
All right, let's talk another game here. Chargers at Cardinals. Really interested, Stefania. You're going to be super involved in this. Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, James Conner, and DeAndre Hopkins.
Will any of them be available? No,
all of them would be lineup locks if they were healthy. But Stefania, you're not kidding there because there are a lot of question marks here with both of these teams.
No, it's like where to
especially
begin.
Arizona.
Okay, let's just start with Kyler Murray, who did not play because of a hamstring injury, and we did hear from Jeremy Fowler that it's a possibility that he's out until week 14. Arizona has a bye in week 13, so
it's my expectation too.
Yep. Hollywood Brown not activated for this game, dealing with the midfoot injury, and was saying back in practice, very excited to play. Again, Arizona not very clear on this kind of thing. I know we need to see more practice out of Hollywood Brown before he plays. I'd like to see him do quite a bit this week before I felt comfortable with him
Still
playing.
expecting him to be back after the bye, personally.
We're talking about practice.
And that would be smart, actually, because then they could get him ramped up during practice. So, but expect them to call him day to day because that's what the Cardinals do. Going over to the other side of the ball with the Chargers, Mike Williams, you saw him leave after 1 catch in the end zone. We talked about that on Sunday. I told you I was nervous about that. Leaves with that high ankle sprain, aggravated, although Brandon Staley said it was not a significant re-injury, but did acknowledge that he had aggravated it, leaving the door open for him to potentially return. Guys, if he comes back and is in and out on one play, maybe what you would want to do is give him a little more time. I'm just saying. So we'll see what happens. And then Gerald Everett last week was downgraded on Saturday to questionable because of a groin issue. So you had
finger.
Yep. And so you had a late downgrade for him going into last week's game.
Ah, my finger.
Really hard.
Sounded
There it
exactly
is.
the same.
Really hard to know what the confidence level will be in his availability coming into this week's game.
All
Wow.
right. So, by the way, I'd hate to add more to Stefania's plate here, but obviously we know that Rondé Moore is banged up as well for the Cardinals.
Yeah, and he left in the very first play with a groin injury, and I would be shocked if we saw him.
And Greg Dortch is banged up as well. Greg Dortch has a hand injury. So you've got potentially 3 of 4 Cardinals wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins being the lone man standing, that could be unavailable on
had
Sunday.
a hamstring issue coming into the game, but
Right,
actually looked
yeah.
pretty good
He
and
did,
came
he
out of
did.
that game pretty
He
well.
came out with his hair on fire.
Yeah.
I had 2 matchups that were dependent upon DeAndre where I needed him to score a certain amount of points, but also not score a certain amount of other points. Right? I had to thread that needle.
Yeah.
Oh my God. The first half, I could not, like the range of
They couldn't
emotions that I
stop
was
him.
feeling.
I was like, why are they playing off him so much? He's just going to keep catching the ball.
Yeah,
and he did. And
well,
then
and I was like, oh my God, I'm definitely, what's going to happen is I'm going to end up like, it was great that you got the win. I needed like a small amount. Like I needed like 4 points from DeAndre, which you feel really good about, right? But then it was like, I needed him to not score 24. And then he has 15 at halftime and I'm
You're like, great. I'm definitely losing the second
DeAndre,
game.
it's time for you to step out.
But yeah, so I would just say
You look
that
good.
assuming, or if all 3 of those guys are out, if all 3 of them are out, I don't know where the Cardinals turn. Daily fantasy play, and I'm no Mike Clay, I'm no Daniel Dopp, I'm no Al Zeidenfeld. Trey McBride becomes interesting for me suddenly
Has
because
to be.
someone's going to have to play for them at wide receiver. Obviously, AJ Green will play a more prominent role, you would think. Candidly, I don't know who else would play a bigger
Oh, do
role
you
for them.
remember who they traded for?
Wait.
Robbie Anderson.
Oh, Robbie Anderson. Oh my God! I
Oh
was
my
like,
God!
yeah.
Do you remember?
Literally, no, I did not remember that because
I
he's
know
had such a
Robbie
non-factor.
Anderson is there, but we
Yeah.
have not seen. He actually played, but you didn't know it because he wasn't targeted.
I
I
thought you
don't
put me on the
believe.
spot there, and you were like joking, and I was like,
Like,
did you just like open
I
a
have never.
like a
I
fake
feel
Schefter tweet?
I'm
You know,
actually,
like
I'm actually quite proud of myself right now
Yeah.
because, like, I have never.
I forgot about Robbie
I never
Anderson,
see
too.
Field at a loss for words. I just pulled that one out of the hat.
Look at
yeah,
that.
it's a tricky.
Ro-
Yeah,
I know,
Robbie Anderson.
Robbie Anderson,
Wow,
who
that
we-
might be my long shot on Sunday.
Hey, now.
I
You're
mean, they
welcome.
traded for him.
I know,
for a
he
reason.
hasn't done
Like, and he didn't do anything. They, like, it's odd. Like when you trade for a guy, I get it. Not all trades work out, but like you would think if you trade for a guy, you would at least try to involve him.
Right.
He's been like hardly involved.
And this would have been the week to start involving him, but maybe now this week
Yeah, this could be
is
it.
the week that we see
So,
Robbie Anderson.
Fantasy football now, Sunday morning, big week. And this to
Damn.
close the circle on the Chargers.
I'm so proud of
I
myself.
kind of think, and right now our projections, our rankings show Mike Williams ranked. I kind of think Josh Palmer, the secret sauce, is being the number 2 wideout for this offense. Not the number 1, but the number 2. And it might actually be specifically that he is the number 2 when Keenan Allen is occupying the slot. Josh Palmer looked great on Sunday.
Yeah.
Great on Sunday night. And if Mike Williams is out, he jumps into top 30 play territory for me, does Josh Palmer. So the rankings will be reflected, obviously, if and when Mike Williams is ruled out. But for now, Mike tends to err on the conservative side, which I agree with, on these injuries before we actually know whether guys are going to practice. Even if we expect Mike Williams to be out, for now, he is currently in the projections.
All right, let's talk Raiders at Seahawks. This one should be a lot of fun. Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, Geno Smith, Ken Walker, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett. All of those guys are lineup locks. Really, the only person I don't see from the Seahawks is a tight end, and you're not starting a tight end. You're basically starting all your Seahawks here this week.
Start them
I
all.
like that projection for Kenneth Walker. By the
That's
way.
a
It's
beautiful
nice.
number.
We all
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
that sticks.
How about that number for Devontae Adams, by the week? Because it's a great matchup. 23 fantasy points here. It is a very, very, very good matchup. So, yeah, this is a pretty chalky game, actually.
Foster Moreau, I think, is my only other question here. Would you be looking at him as a tight end without Darren Waller this week?
He's like Evan Ingram to me. But
I'm-
maybe even
that's
less. I mean,
right
he had
in that
one
same line.
catch last
They're
week,
just
right?
really
for
not
Foster Moreau.
using their tight ends. Period. Even when Darren Waller was there, they're not.
Those guys are the kind of tight ends that are great as a dart throw if you play daily fantasy, but when it comes to season long, it's like you just can't. It doesn't work out that same
It's
way.
also I just don't know what's going on with the Raiders.
Yeah, same. And I you know, the question for the
offense is
Raiders is
really
whether
struggling.
last week serves as a like sort of a springboard for them going forward. I still don't know that I totally buy it. They beat the Broncos, but like, can we talk about this for a second?
Sure, we can.
What on earth were the Broncos doing at the end of that game this
I have
past
no
week?
idea.
When on the ball on 3rd and 10,
That could
Russ
be
is throwing
said
the ball,
about
throws it down.
so many
lot
of
of
their
things
games this year. Actually,
that's a good
are you
point.
talking about this week or are you talking about
That's
any
the
other
theme
week?
of their season.
It
right?
is.
Is like
It's
what
so
on earth they're
bad.
doing.
Cut
But
to KJ Hamler in the end zone. Like
I'm
throwing it
frustrated, and I hate to be this guy. I really do, and I'm going to break my own
That's
rule
all
here.
right.
But
a
I'm
holiday.
frustrated because
guy.
if they had just run the ball and eaten up another 40 seconds of clock, it increased the odds of that game being over in regulation against the Raiders.
Yes.
And if that game had been over in regulation, I would have had the first ever perfect week in red zone in the storied history of fantasy football now.
Wow, that's where we're going with that.
Because I had Russell Wilson over
You had
Derek
9
Carr
out
for
of 10
passing
this
yards.
week?
Yeah. Thanks
Oh my
for
gosh.
noticing the email.
I stopped
I
reading
blocked
the
it
email
out.
because I'm at the bottom of the rankings.
No, it's not
so
that
I was
bad.
like, it's painful.
I'll tell you what.
Wow, that's
that-
impressive.
Here's
So I
the
had
swing.
Russell was ahead of Derek Carr, and then in overtime, the big touchdown play gets him over the edge.
Here's the swing on that. While Field didn't go 10-0, that Devontae Adams touchdown won Al Zeidenfeld $10,000 in
I
one
saw
of his
that.
DraftKings
By the way,
tournaments.
shout out to Smizzle, who posted on Twitter like he was promoting the game and like thanking Devontae Adams in the fine print. I'm like, $10,000. Where's your friend? How about your friend Stefania?
But
Al,
let me ask you a
who
question.
gives you all your injury information.
Wow.
You guys know Al well.
Yeah,
$10,000 for Al is like,
drop in the bucket.
yeah, that's like,
Walking around money was
Yes.
the tweet I believe he posted.
Yes.
To me.
Yes.
I know.
like,
I know.
like Al wins $10,000 like twice a month.
I know
Yes.
because
Like talk to me,
he's
Al.
won the million.
Hey, Al
acre-
Zeidenfeld. I know you're out there listening.
That's
Talk to me when you win $1 million. Okay. Which you only
Well,
do.
he
You do it
already
like
has.
once a year.
He already
Right.
has.
Yeah, of course.
Al, don't forget your friends who help you. You know, you do use somebody's injury information. This I know to be
It's a big
fact.
swing,
Ow,
though.
my
That
finger.
Devontae Adams play was a huge swing for a lot of people,
Ow.
huge for everybody. All right,
I would have listen, Al. You owe me $10,000.
Okay, that's what it is. I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. Let's talk Rams at Chiefs here. This one
Oh,
is going to
God, do
be
we
a
have to?
short list. We've got Tyler Higbee for the Rams and Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce for the Chiefs.
God, what a world we live in.
Really, Stefania, let's start with the Chiefs wide receivers only because I want to talk about Juju Smith-Schuster and the injuries that they have there.
Okay. I also,
Well, let's start where you want to start, Stefania.
I wanted to start with Matthew Stafford.
I want to
Yeah.
start with him too.
because he may not be the quarterback this week. If you saw him go into the blue medical tent to be evaluated for concussion, did not return to the game, and it was sort of unclear what his status was. Remember, it was unclear going into the prior week about him having a concussion. Had gone through the protocol, took the steps to be cleared. A second injury that close together
Makes me
makes
nervous.
me a little more nervous, and it could very well be the case that we do not have Matthew Stafford this week. So I want people to be prepared for that. Not saying it's going to happen, but this is it's one to watch very closely. And then Juju Smith-Schuster also coming off a concussion injury, missed last week. Let's see what happens going into this
I mean, impossible. By the way, we do know that Kadarius Toney has a hamstring injury.
Yep.
No information whatsoever, but
No, but
left early, missed the rest of the game.
And again, this is a reminder, all the people who are like, yeah, kind of like it was New York. Nope. This is chronic hamstring injury for Kadarius Toney on both sides. It's potentially a problem for him going forward.
All right, so just take a big step back here, people, and realize that it's week 12 of the NFL season. And we just told you that the only lineup lock for the Los Angeles Rams is Tyler Higbee. My, how the mighty have fallen.
Seriously.
And Darrell
they-
Henderson got waived.
That's what I was just gonna say.
So the running backs, we don't like who's running back for the Rams. I mean, is it now Cam Akers, who is totally out of favor? Remember when they weren't talking? Cam Akers was like gone. He disappeared. Now he's the RB1.
Yesterday, when that Darrell Henderson news popped up, I thought I channeled my inner Brian Windhorse, and I was like, "What's going on in LA?" That running back room has been bizarre all
so
season.
weird.
Cam Akers, who a month ago looked like he was going to be shipped to like the CFL.
It sounded like he was going to leave, and then it was like they had a little powwow, and then all of a sudden he was back in okay graces, but not really playing.
Yeah.
Now he's
He had
now he's
14 carries
RB1.
last week for 61 yards.
Yeah.
He was their highest
And
scoring
Kyren
running back in
Williams?
fantasy last week.
I didn't
so-
like that.
Kyren Williams. What about where's he fit in?
So here's where I've netted out is that we all know, and Schefter's been telling us about this for months, that the
A
Rams
long
have
time.
viewed Kyren Williams as a player that could become their starting running back. Don't forget, this is important context, that the Rams, who had no draft picks this past year, or very few, used multiple picks to move up in the draft to go grab Kyren Williams, right? That's how much they viewed this player as a potential starting running back on their roster. Now, I think next year, if things are back in place, Cooper Kupp's healthy and Matthew Stafford is good and all those things that you would expect to happen are back in place, I think there's a chance that we kind of value Kyren Williams as a potential breakthrough player next season. But I just don't know if any running back right now has any chance of going anywhere with the Rams. They're second in the NFL in rushing yards, second fewest rushing yards per game behind or ahead of only the Buccaneers, who we talked about earlier on in the show. The offensive line has dealt with innumerable injuries so far this season. They can't block anybody.
Nope.
And if you have Bryce Perkins as a starting quarterback and you are the Kansas City Chiefs, yeah, that's right, then your strategy is fine. You want to beat us? Go ahead.
Yep.
Beat us throwing the ball.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm at with the I have both of these running backs ranked outside my top 40 this week. I don't feel good about anybody in this offense. Tyler Higbee because he plays tight end, but I don't feel great about them. The Rams have already traded away their first round pick. It's a sunk cost. It's not like they need to, they seem to be a team that very soon could be turning the page to 2023.
Yep.
And if that means playing young guys, moving on from players that perhaps are disgruntled, like Darrell Henderson, who took to Twitter and basically expressed enthusiasm about losing his job yesterday, maybe that's a sign of where things are headed right now. So I feel very, very, very queasy about starting any Rams player other than Tyler Higbee. I have Allen Robinson as wide receiver 36. The saving grace is probably that A, he is playing the most amongst all Rams wide receivers, and B, that the Chiefs, because they are so often playing with such a gigantic lead, do tend to let up a lot of passing yards.
Garbage time is the only thing that I could be thinking of from that standpoint. All right,
Yes,
what about
indeed.
these running backs really quickly for the Chiefs? Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon. Obviously, you watch Isaiah Pacheco get a ton of run, dominate on the ground, have 107 yards on the ground last week. But, Field, you've been talking about how Jerick McKinnon is the pass-catching guy. He just has more upside within this offense. This is a tough one because I feel like they're as close as they have been all season long for me this week.
I think what the reality is that you can get 10 points out of one Chiefs running back per week. It's hard to know which 10 points it'll be,
That's
or which
fair.
running back it'll be to get you those 10 points.
Which 10 points?
But I wouldn't expect much more than 10 or so points.
Yep.
Pacheco has this day that is being lauded fairly as this great performance against the Chargers on Sunday night.
It was a great NFL performance, less fantasy performance.
10.7 fantasy points. One target in his past 4 games. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I expect to be out on Sunday because of an ankle sprain, so that does narrow things down a little bit. But
he
Ronald
wasn't-
Jones could be activated.
yeah,
they could
and
sign Melvin Gordon
Clyde
and
Edwards-Helaire
play
wasn't
on
stealing
Sunday.
that much from anybody anyway.
Yeah,
so.
but just one less back to worry about.
Yeah.
And it could be that Ronald Jones comes in and he runs hard for a couple plays, and you're like, oh, maybe he'll get some work. So
The best ball leagues that I
all of
did in
them
May
outside.
really hopes that Ronald Jones gets some work here soon.
all of those running backs are outside my top 30. Not as bad as the Rams running backs,
No, but outside the
I
top
just don't
30.
think there's a ton of upside there in this.
Just throw
rushing
the ball
offense.
a lot, Kansas City. And
Yeah, you know what? Travis Kelce
Entertainment.
matters. How's
Yeah,
that?
Yeah.
exactly. There you go.
he's pretty good.
All right, we got a couple more games, but first, Stefania.
Nope,
and
me first.
Field. First, Field.
First,
Sorry
me.
about that.
Kick off your investing journey by exploring exchange-traded funds. Exchange-traded funds, known as ETFs for short, create baskets of stocks, bonds, and other assets that you can buy in a single trade, helping you avoid putting all your hopes on a single draft pick. At Global X, we specialize in ETFs to track emerging technologies like the rise of electric vehicles and strategies designed to generate income. Visit globalxetfs.com to discover more.
College football season is heating up, and Dr. Pepper and the residents of Fansville invite you to revel in another one-of-a-kind year of flexing your foam finger, humming your school's fight song in your sleep, and thriving on a steady diet of buffalo chicken dip and post-game day commentary. All washed down with a rich, delicious Dr. Pepper, of course. Another Saturday is always just around the corner, so make sure your tailgate doesn't turn into a failgate, and pick up a case of ice-cold Dr. Pepper, the one fans deserve.
She's not a cone, she's your favorite gal. She's Stefania Bay.
I actually really wanted Dr. Pepper right now. That sounds
Yeah, that'd
so
be great,
good.
wouldn't it?
I don't know
Great.
why
So
it's
refreshing.
not even lunchtime, but that actually sounds really
That sounds really
You know
good.
what? It actually is lunchtime in my since I became a dad. 10 a.m. is lunchtime.
Is lunchtime?
I swear, like when I'm home, I'm not at the office. Like 10 a.m. and I'm just like, can I, get?
I don't eat my first meal until around 1 or 2.
Whoa,
I don't know what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
I
I eat my
just- I
first
don't-
meal at like 5:30.
that's crazy.
in the morning.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And my last meal, usually around 5:30 at night too.
You are old man Field.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's talk about. Oh, Stefania, you're definitely invested in this one. Saints at 49ers lineup blocks for this game include
No,
Alvin
I'll let you
Kamara,
guys talk about my 40. I don't want to brag.
Okay,
I'm just
all
gonna
right.
hang out while you guys do this.
Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, and George Kittle. Noticeably missing from that, Field Yates, Brandon Ayuk, who has been a top 20 wide receiver in 4 of the last 5 weeks, but there are a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, and since that CMC trade, I think we've seen A lot of targets get divvied up there.
It's a really tricky one because on the one hand, in the 4 games since Christian McCaffrey was traded to the 49ers, he actually leads the team in catches, targets, and receiving yards.
Yep.
And receiving touchdowns, by the way. All that's really good. On the other hand, on Monday night, he had just 2 targets. So it's sort of weighing the recency bias against those 4 games, wondering if 4 games is enough of a sample size, and just trying to use logic here, right? Is that Ayuk's awesome. Who's more awesome, though? Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel?
Deebo Samuel.
Deebo Samuel. And I say that with all the praise in the world for Brandon Ayuk. It's just like you expect that the hierarchy is going to be 1, Christian McCaffrey because he plays running back and they get lots of touches, as it were. 2, Deebo Samuel because he is one of the best players, period, in the NFL. 3, Brandon Ayuk because he's a really talented guy, but just not quite at that next level. That's the reason why you have him a little bit lower. Still a very strong option. I am not going to bat an eyelash at anybody that starts Brandon Ayuk on Sunday. I just think that it's possible that number that was at like 7 targets per game, maybe it drops to 4 or 5.
I think there's going to be a little bit of a regression because we watched him and Jimmy G just have this chemistry with each other, right? But it takes a little bit of time. You add a new guy like CMC to the offense. People are starting to get healthy. They're at a spot where like now they're starting to flow.
Yeah.
And it's not just him throwing the ball to Brandon Ayuk. There's enough that they'll be able to get some things used to. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a regression from Brandon Ayuk. He's still going to be used in this offense, but he's not going to be the top 20 guy that you have seen in 4 of the last 5 weeks going forward.
Yeah, I also think that the touchdown, that's just a lot of touchdowns. 5 touchdowns in 5 games. That's hard to,
that, though, Stefania, is not because Brandon Ayuk is bad. It's because the rest of the 49ers are so good. They got so many other options.
I know.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure.
I do think the only thing I would say to that, I agree in general with what you're saying because Christian McCaffrey cuts into Brandon Ayuk, but I also think just watching Kyle Shanahan as closely as I have over the last few years, he changes up the game script a lot depending on the matchup and who has a key role. So we saw Christian McCaffrey go from high usage to low usage to high usage.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I just think with the wide receivers, like you're right. You're totally right that it's hard to get inside the brain of Kyle Shanahan. As best we can, though, we think that Deebo is the one that must be ranked as a must start.
Yep.
Ayuk a little bit lower on the pecking order.
Totally agree with that.
And I'll say it. I think Jimmy G's a sneaky value this week. He's playing really good ball of late. They had the one game against the Chargers. As I think I mentioned this already on the show, Brandon Staley said, and you don't often hear coaches say this, like, he said, that was the best game plan I've ever put together.
Wow.
As a defensive play caller. They had a really, really, really smart game plan. I'm not sure teams can replicate that, both in terms of the game plan itself and some of the pieces that the Chargers still have. Jimmy G facing a New Orleans Saints defense that could be without Cam Jordan, could be without Marshawn Lattimore, could be without Pete Werner, who's been an awesome, awesome player for them this season. Wouldn't surprise me if Jimmy G, I have him as my quarterback 13, has another nice day.
16 or more fantasy points since week 5. Every single game since week 5. The thing about Jimmy G is that consistency that he brings you, but last week gave you some of that upside with all the weapons that he has in this offense. So you could certainly do worse as a streamer option here.
They're a
this
nightmare.
Week.
They're a nightmare. And I'm not trying to like get Stefania's hopes up.
No, I'm with you.
If I were to take a really long, hard look at the NFC right now, they definitely have the look of a team that'll be playing deep into January and maybe even into mid-February.
Really quick on this, Juwan Johnson just scores nothing but touchdowns at the tight end position, and that makes it tough, right?
It does. And, there are obviously guys that have been banged up. Mike Thomas is out for the season, and Jarvis Landry has been back, but not exactly a difference maker for the Saints. How lucky do you feel?
Yeah, yet to have more than 5 catches in a game, under 5 targets in 3 of his past 4. He literally just keeps catching touchdowns, and it's tough to count on that.
In a non-PPR league, there's some value there.
Totally,
right?
Absolutely.
Because that's how you're getting those points.
Yep. All right, this next one, Packers at Eagles.
Yeah.
Lineup blocks include Aaron Jones, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. Seems pretty fair across the board. Aaron Rodgers nowhere near a lineup block for us. Field Yates, are you taking on these Philadelphia Eagles? I'm staying as far away from Aaron Rodgers as I possibly can, and of course that means he's going to throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, but I can't start Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I have my doubts here. So on the good side for Aaron Rodgers, he has back-to-back games with 19 or more fantasy points. On the bad side, there is not a single team that allows fewer fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks than the Eagles. The strength of their team, and it's a very, 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 very good team, is their secondary. They have playmakers at both cornerback and safety. If you have the opportunity to avoid, this would be the week to avoid Aaron Rodgers, despite his recent surge. He is quarterback 19 for me. So, yes, I am down on Aaron Rodgers this week.
All right, let's talk about these two wide receivers then, because over the last 2 weeks, Stefania Bell, we've watched this rookie, Christian Watson, become the wide receiver 2 over the last 2 weeks, only behind Devontae Adams.
He's it.
But are you trusting him more than you would be trusting Alan Lazard, or do you feel like, hey, these were 2 great weeks because they were able to take advantage of some matchups and some things went right? Or are you trusting this long-term, like going forward, like he's a flex play for you? He's someone that you're trusting here this week against Philadelphia?
I'm going with the recency bias. I just think Aaron Rodgers is kind of fickle in terms of who he trusts. And he's got something good going with Christian Watson right now. Christian Watson, who is touted to be potentially a breakout wide receiver. There's reason they went after him, but he was hurt in the OTAs, had the knee surgery, then a hamstring injury, could never get healthy. And Aaron Rodgers sort of referenced it just a couple weeks ago, saying basically, guys, things that they thought they were going to get out of guys, they're now just starting to get out of them, and it's paying off. He trusts him.
What about, I mean, how does that work with Alan Lazard then, Field?
I have Alan Lazard ranked a few spots higher than Christian Watson. Again, to reiterate, a tough matchup. So neither one of these guys is considered a lineup lock for that reason.
Had a wide receiver cornerback matchup article already,
Mike would be telling us all about how it'd be a really tough sled this week for the Packers. But no question, Stefania is accurate. You would think Aaron Rodgers would be saying, what's the one thing that's worked for us this year in the passing game? The guy who has 5 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. Alan Lazard has run 10 more routes than Christian Watson over the past 2 games. So Lazard's still the busiest Packers wide receiver. And while we've been talking about the brilliance of Christian Watson finding the end zone the past couple of games, that's like all Alan Lazard typically does, right? He's a great touchdown-making wide receiver himself. So I've got him at wide receiver 26. I have Watson as wide receiver 30, a little bit ahead of our ESPN consensus this week. And I try to rank in part, I try to do things independent of like momentum and how I would feel if it were the player that I were ranking, and also completely dependent upon those 2 things. I know that's a very contradictory thing to say. But like if I have Christian Watson and he's been this great over the past 2 weeks, you're really telling me that I'm just going to straight up bench the guy?
Yeah.
I don't think many people will be, even in a very, very tough matchup.
I have him probably a little too low right now. I have him as wide receiver 36. There is a little bit of that fear that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back down to earth. They're playing the Philadelphia Eagles. All these, there are a lot of factors.
He's not going to score 2 touchdowns every week.
Right.
And he had 4 catches in each of the past 2 games.
But if he becomes this upside play like we thought at the beginning of the season, where like, hey, he could break any one of these plays, that any one of these Aaron Rodgers passes for a touchdown. Sure. All of a sudden it becomes someone you at least have to think about. All right. What about the rest of this this Philadelphia Eagles team? Miles Sanders, you're looking at. No, I don't think Miles Sanders, I think I would be looking to start at running back. He would be a low-end RB2 or a high-end flex play for me, and I don't think I would look really anywhere else. No tight ends, nothing like,
Yeah, Miles Sanders still on the radar. I made the comparison. Mike didn't totally buy it. I made the comparison recently between Miles Sanders and Devin Singletary, like guys that you kind of still feel obligated to start because the usage is pretty good.
Mike's an idiot.
It's not elite. Yeah, duh. Not much. But Miles Sanders has 1 catch over the past 2 weeks. 1. So not a factor in the passing game, nearly consistently enough. And as we know, as has been the problem for him throughout his career, does not find the end zone a ton. So this is not, Nick Chubb or obviously those are like the extremes. Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, who get little passing game utilization.
A little bit of Dameon Pierce, though, right? Is that fair?
Dameon Pierce, but just not the nearly the runner, right? Right. So it's like, and it's a tricky one here. So I've got him as RB21 this week.
I'm with you on that one. All right, let's talk one more game here. Monday Night Football. Steelers at the Colts.
Fighting Jeff Saturdays.
That music always gets me pumped up. Let's talk about I feel like lineup blocks. Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman, those 2 are obvious. You look at the rest of these.
Welcome back, Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, he looks great.
Great.
Looked great.
It's just so nice to see him running the way we know he can run. Number 1, he's healthy. Number 2, obviously, their offense looks a little bit different now last couple of weeks.
I think this offense, Paris Campbell has come on in a big way, and we have talked about that. He continues to look really good in this offense. I was hoping that Alec Pierce, the rookie that we had talked about early on in the season, was going to come on. But with Matt Ryan under center, Paris Campbell staying healthy looks like a wide receiver that you can trust in your flex position going forward here, I feel like.
I've got him as wide receiver 38. The Matt Ryan connection's real. Over 11.7 fantasy points in the 4 starts that Matt Ryan has most recently made. 18.5 fantasy points per game in those games.
That's good.
That's ridiculous for Paris Campbell.
Staying
they're
healthy.
playing at this time of the year. We're more mindful of weather than ever. They're playing in Indianapolis, so obviously no concerns about the weather there. And then the Steelers allow the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers in the league.
Crazy.
So it's a good matchup here.
So un-Steeler-like.
Yeah. I would make the case, though, that Najee Harris belongs in the lineup block category, and here's the reason why.
After last week's game?
And perhaps more importantly, Jalen Warren is iffy to play on Monday night. Mike Tomlin said that yesterday he had been stealing like enough of Najee Harris's opportunities to be a bit annoying, but last week Najee Harris handled every running back carry for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 4 catches as well. Benny Snell be the next man up. I would think he played a little bit last week, but did not get any opportunities. So I think Najee, I have him as RB22, but pretty close to a lineup lock, even if there are all 16 teams playing this week.
If there was a Steelers wide receiver that you were choosing here, Stefania, George Pickens has looked fantastic, but Deontay Johnson is still like a stud.
It's still got to be Deontay Johnson for me. If he could just get in the end zone.
Yeah, right?
I flipped it. Yeah, I flipped it.
I mean,
I
it's
have
hard. George Pickens seems to be the preferred guy for Kenny Pickett right now.
Yeah, so I flipped it. Since the Chase Claypool trade, it's a very small sample size, but 2 games, they've run the exact same number of routes, 75 each over those 2 games. Pickens, though, has just been so much more productive, and
explosive.
Pickens has better big play upside. He has better touchdown upside because Deontay hasn't scored one this season.
Yep.
It could have been a better day for George Pickens. The weird part about George Pickens is that he makes the hardest catches in the world and then drops the easy ones. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a lack of concentration or what, but he had a near massive big play last week that just went right through the wicket, so to speak. There seems to be a bit more of a connection between he and Kenny Pickett. Tough sledding right now for Deontay Johnson. So I have Pickens ranked wide receiver 39 on my board this week. Deontay Johnson further down. As we always tell you guys, though, very bad matchup. While the Steelers allow the most wide receiver fantasy points per game, the Colts allow the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. We saw it last week with A.J. Brown, to a degree, Devontae Smith.
Yep.
The Eagles had a tough offensive day until Jalen Hurts put him back on his shoulders, as he has been doing throughout this season. So I would prefer not to start a Steelers wide receiver, but I do have Pickens ahead on my board right now.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I also would say that Pat Fryermuth is someone that I'm starting at the tight end position. Probably a lineup block for me at the tight end.
Okay, that was my bad for not saying that. He is unquestionably a lineup block
at the tight end
He's
position.
been awesome. He has been, I think right now, if I were to pick my tight ends for the rest of the year, we know number 1, Travis Kelce, number 2, Mark Andrews. I think Pat Fryermuth might be number 3.
Wow. Rest of the season.
Over George Kittle.
Maybe.
I think
Kittle's, an amazing talent and much better after the catch and has so much more big play
I
upside.
just feel like with the offense picking up, the doors opened a little bit more for George Kittle to have some opportunities.
I like Dalton Schultz more than I like George Kittle. Maybe.
It's close. I think that what you were getting from Pat Fryermuth is that the volume is going to be steady every single week.
Yeah.
Kittle, because he's so good in so many ways, and because they have 9,000 good players, he could have a 4-target game, and you'd be like, "Oh, okay." They won by 27 points, and he had 4 targets. That makes sense.
Yeah, it sucks. He's so good at blocking and stuff. Like if he
Way
was
too
He's just
good.
so good.
right,
So good in every way.
That's the problem. He's just too good at He's too good at everything. All right,
Too good at life.
that's gonna do it for us for today and for this week.
Yeah,
We're going to have a CSS DFS podcast coming in a little bit later. We're, Mike and I are going to record over Zoom because we just want to find out.
Al's still going to work.
Al's still going to work in spite of that
Good for him.
$10,000 paycheck that he just got. Yes.
You owe me.
It's going to be a great week. Make sure that you have a ton of fun. Please have patience with your families. Let's acknowledge that sometimes Thanksgiving can be tough, and we understand that, but we love each other. We hope that you guys also love each other. Don't forget to be kind to yourself and to those that you are with this week. We love you guys. We will not see you for the rest of this week, but we will see you on Fantasy Football Now at 10 a.m. Eastern on
ESPN 2.
Monday on
ESPN 2.
Yep, we're back on the deuce.
Done.
I'll talk to you guys. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so
See you
much.
guys.
Am I still invited to your house this weekend, Stefania?
Of course.
Okay, good.
Just hop a plane.
Hop a plane. It's the third
Al
house.
can loan me his.
That's what it is.